The clanking of metal locks echoed through the halls of Huntsville State Penitentiary, as if counting down the final seconds of someone's life. Dr. Emily Carter walked through an endless tunnel of gray concrete and steel, each step bringing her closer to the meeting she had waited 15 years to make. The air here was thick with the smell of disinfectant, sweat, and something else. That special scent of despair that could not be washed away or masked. Security guard Thomas Williams, a massive man with a face lined with fatigue, glanced over his shoulder at her. "Doctor, are you sure you want to meet him without extra security?" Morris may look like a university professor, but he tore out the last psychologist's throat with his bare hands. Granted, that was 12 years ago. Emily clutched the leather file tighter. Inside were the photographs that haunted her dreams. The mutilated bodies Jacob Morris had left behind as an artist's signature to his work. And among them, a picture of Sarah, her younger sister, found in the Louisiana woods with the same telltale wounds. "I've been studying his case for 15 years, Officer Williams. I know every detail of every murder. Morris only kills in a certain pattern, only in a certain emotional state. He's in a depressive phase right now. That's safe for me." Williams chuckled. "If you say so, Doc. But I'll be right outside the door. One shout and we'll be in." Visiting room number 7 was a square, 10 by 10 feet, with white walls, a metal table, and 2 chairs. No sharp corners, no objects that could be used as weapons. Even the handles were soft, rubbery. The only window was a narrow slit in the ceiling, letting in dim Texas light. Emily sat down on a chair facing the door and opened the folder. Her hands were shaking, barely noticeable, but she could feel it. 15 years of professional training. Hundreds of interviews with killers, maniacs, psychopaths. But this case was special. This case was personal. The door opened and Jacob Morris walked in. The first thing that struck Emily was that he looked completely ordinary. A man of 52, of average height, with graying hair neatly combed back. Glasses with thin frames, a clean prison uniform. The calm movements of a man who controls every muscle in his body. If she had met him on the street, she would have taken him for a librarian or a school teacher. But the eyes. There was an abyss in Morris's eyes that looked at the world with the cold curiosity of an entomologist studying insects. "Dr. Emily Carter," he said, sitting down opposite her. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Author of The Psychopathology of Serial Killers, an analysis of motivational structures. Brilliant research, I must say, especially the chapter on the projection of traumatic experiences on victim selection." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't expected him to know her work. "Mr. Morris, I'm here for a psychological evaluation as part of your appeal. I look forward to your cooperation." Morris smiled, a thin, barely noticeable smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cooperation, interesting word, implies reciprocity, doesn't it? You study me, I study you. Fair exchange. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "Tell me, Dr. Carter, what did you feel when you learned that your sister had been found in those woods?" Anger. Relief that the search was over, or something more complex. The world around Emily froze. The air grew thick as molasses. Morris wasn't supposed to know about Sarah. That information was sealed, removed from all public records. How did he? "I can see from your face that you're surprised," Morris continued, leaning forward. "Did you think your personal connection to the case would remain a secret?" "Doctor, I've been in this cage for 15 years. I've had plenty of time to study everyone who's taken an interest in my case. especially those who've taken an interest too much. Emily forced herself to remain professionally calm, even though her heart was pounding like crazy. "Mr. Morris, let's focus on the purpose of our meeting. I want to understand the motives behind your actions, the psychological factors which turned an ordinary man into a monster," he interrupted. "But you see, Doctor, I am not a monster. I am an artist. Every artist has his own style, his own signature. My work had a clear structure, a certain aesthetic." Morris stood up and began to walk slowly around the room. His movements were fluid, almost dance-like. 23 works over 5 years, each one carefully planned, executed with surgical precision. Only men between the ages of 30 and 45. Only those who had hurt women or children. Only a certain type of wound, a certain positioning of the body. He stopped directly in front of Emily, placing his hands on the table. "But your sister, Dr. Carter, didn't fit into my artistic concept." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She clutched the edge of the table, trying to keep her balance. "What do you mean by this?" "I want to say that I did not kill Sarah Carter." The silence in the room became deafening. Emily could only hear the beating of her own heart and the distant hum of the ventilation. "It's impossible. Evidence, DNA, method of murder." "The method of murder was copied from my previous works. Rather crudely, I must say. Whoever did it understood technique but had no sense of art." Morris returned to his seat. "Your sister was an exception, Doctor. Someone else took advantage of my reputation to cover up his crime." Emily felt reality crumbling around her. For 15 years, she had lived with the certainty that her sister's killer was in prison. 15 years of hatred, of thirst for justice, of professional development, all for this moment. "Suppose I believe you," she said, surprised at how calm her voice sounded. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want in return?" Morris took a folded photograph from his robe pocket and placed it on the table. "I want you to find who really killed your sister. In exchange, I'll help you understand how it happened." Emily picked up the photograph with trembling fingers. It was of Sarah, alive, smiling, standing outside a cafe in downtown New Orleans. The photo had been taken the day before she disappeared. But according to the investigation, Sarah was at the university that day, 200 miles away. In the background, barely discernible, was the figure of a man in a police uniform. "Where did you get this?" Emily whispered. "My cellmate Ray Johnson was a photographer before he was sent here for killing his wife. He found this picture among some old films he kept in his locker. He recognized your sister from the newspaper photos." Morris leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Dr. Carter, what if I told you that among those investigating my case was a man who used my methods for his own purposes? What if the real killer of your sister wore a badge and swore an oath to protect the innocent?" Emily stared at the photograph, and the world around her slowly turned upside down. If Morris was telling the truth, then everything she had believed for 15 years was a lie. Not only was her sister's killer on the loose, he might be the man who had been investigating. "Detective Richard Blackman," she said, remembering the officer who had overseen Sarah's case. "He found the body. He collected evidence." "He was very thorough in collecting evidence," Morris agreed. "Maybe too thorough. Some of it may have come after the body was found." Morris stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "Think about it, Dr. Carter. Go over the case file again. Look for inconsistencies, coincidences that are too convenient, witnesses that cannot be verified. And when you are ready to know the whole truth, come back." He headed towards the door, then turned around. "Oh, one more thing. Be careful who you trust with your discoveries. If I'm right about Detective Blackman, he's not the only one. And they'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets." The door closed behind him with a metallic clang, leaving Emily alone in the white room with the photograph of her dead sister in her hands. She sat still for another 10 minutes, trying to process what she had heard. Morris could be lying. Serial killers were masters of manipulation. But the photo was real, and the discrepancy about Sarah's whereabouts was real too. Emily put the photo in a folder and left the room. Security guard Williams was waiting for her in the hallway. "How did it go, Doc? Did Morris behave himself?" "Yes," she answered automatically. "Everything went fine." But nothing was normal. In an hour's conversation with a serial killer, her world had been turned upside down. And now she had to figure out who was telling the truth, the justice system she had served her entire life, or the man who had killed 23 people and claimed he was innocent of the death of the 24th. As Emily left the prison, she felt the eyes of the surveillance cameras on her. For the first time in her life, she felt like they were watching her, not the prisoners. And somewhere deep down, in the place where her darkest fears hid, she began to suspect that Jacob Morris was right. That the real monster wore the badge all these years and swore to protect the innocent. And what did this monster know about her visit to prison? Rain pounded the windows of Emily's office in the FBI building, turning the Houston evening skyline into a blurry watercolor of neon lights and shadows. She sat at her desk, surrounded by boxes of Morris case files she'd requested immediately after returning from prison. Every document, every photograph, every interrogation report lay before her like a puzzle she'd been putting together for the third time in 15 years. But now she was looking not for evidence of Morris's guilt, but for the lack of it. Sarah's photograph lay next to the computer keyboard, a mute reproach and a mystery at the same time. Emily zoomed in on the image. On the screen, studying every detail, Madeline's Cafe on Royal Street in New Orleans. She remembered the place. Sarah often mentioned it in her letters, said it served the best coffee in town. But according to official records, on the day of her disappearance, Sarah was in Baton Rouge, at Louisiana State University, where she was studying journalism. The distance between the cities is 130 miles. Even by car, it's at least a 2-hour drive. Emily opened a file of witness statements. Professor David Stanford claimed to have seen Sarah in a lecture at 2:01 p.m. Librarian. Mary Johnson confirmed that the girl had checked out books at 4:30 p.m. Dormmate Lisa Connor said that Sarah returned to her room around 6 p.m., but the photo was taken at 3:45 p.m., according to the file's metadata. If Sarah was in the New Orleans cafe at that time, the witness's testimony was false. Emily reached for her phone and dialed private investigator Michael O'Connor, a former colleague who had left the FBI after the evidence tampering scandal. If anyone could help her backdate her alibi, it was him. "Mike, this is Emily Carter. I need your help." "Emily, I haven't heard your voice in a long time. What happened?" "I'm reviewing an old case. I need to verify the testimony of witnesses from 15 years ago, unofficially." Pause. O'Connor was experienced enough to know that when an FBI agent turned to a private agent for unofficial help, it was serious business. "Does this concern your sister?" Emily winced. She had never told O'Connor about her personal connection to the Morris case. "How do you know?" Emily, I've been with the Bureau for 20 years. Do you think I haven't noticed how you react whenever this case is mentioned? Plus, you're the only agent who's ever studied Morris's file as closely as if it were a personal vendetta. She closed her eyes, feeling another illusion of privacy crumble. Mike, I don't think Morris killed Sarah. And I think the real killer might be connected to the investigation. A long pause. When O'Connor spoke again, his voice was serious. Emily, be careful. If you're right, you're digging in a very dangerous direction. Meet me tomorrow at the old place. The connection was lost. Emily looked at her watch. 10:30 at night. The FBI building was almost empty. Only the security guards and a few workaholics like her were still working. She returned to the case file, focusing on Detective Richard Blackman's work. His reports were the epitome of police thoroughness. Every piece of evidence documented, every witness interviewed, every lead followed up. Too perfect for a real investigation where there were always blind spots and inconsistencies. Emily opened Blackman's timeline of events. March 15th, 7:30 p.m. Sarah Carter fails to show up for dinner at her dorm. March 16th, 8 a.m. Roommate reports missing. March 16th, 10:15 a.m. Detective Blackman takes report. March 17th, 2:20 p.m. Sarah's car found in mall parking lot. March 20th, 7:45. Body found in woods 30 miles outside of town. Everything seemed logical, but one thing caught Emily's attention. The car was found a day after it disappeared, but witnesses claimed to have seen it in the parking lot on the evening of March 15th. Why did it take 2 days to notice it? Emily found the vehicle inspection report. No signs of a struggle, no fingerprints, other than Sarah's. The keys were on the driver's seat. It looked like the car had been parked carefully and abandoned. Too neat. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. An unfamiliar number. Dr. Carter? The voice was male, slightly hoarse, with a barely noticeable southern accent. Yes, I'm listening. My name is Ray Johnson. I'm Jacob Morris's cellmate. He asked me to give you something. Emily tensed. Prisoners weren't allowed to call strangers without permission from the administration. How did you get my number? That's not important. What's important is that I have information about your sister. Meet me tomorrow at 2 o'clock in Herman Park by the Sam Houston statue. Mr. Johnson, you are in prison. How can you? I was released this morning, on parole. A lucky coincidence, isn't it? The connection was cut off, leaving Emily with a growing sense of unease. Too many coincidences in one day. Too many people who knew of her interest in her sister's case. She gathered the documents and headed for the exit. In the elevator, she was caught up with a colleague, Agent David Harris, with whom she had worked on several cases. Emily, staying out late? What are you working on? Reviewing old materials. Routine. Harris nodded, but his gaze lingered on the folder in her hands. The Morris affair. An interesting choice for evening reading. Emily felt a twinge of suspicion. How did Harris know she was looking into Morris's case? Just refreshing my memory before tomorrow's interview. Of course. By the way, I heard that Blackman got promoted. He's now Deputy Director of Special Operations. The elevator stopped at the first floor. Emily stepped out, feeling Harris's eyes on her. At home, she locked the door and drew the curtains. Paranoia was an occupational disease of FBI agents, but today it seemed justified. Emily sat down at her computer and began searching for information about Richard Blackman. The official biography was impressive. 30 years in law enforcement, dozens of solved cases, an impeccable reputation. But between the lines, a different story was read. Blackman specialized in cases that received high press coverage. Serial killers, high-profile kidnappings, corruption scandals. Always the center of attention, always the culprit, always the confession, always too much. Emily dug into local newspaper archives, studying the cases Blackman had handled. A pattern began to emerge. Every high-profile case had a convenient suspect. Someone with a criminal record, mental health issues, or simply no alibi. Evidence would appear at the right time. Witnesses would give the right testimony, and the cases would be closed quickly and effectively. At 3 a.m., Emily found what she was looking for. A 2008 Times-Picayune article about an investigative report on police corruption in New Orleans. The author was Sarah Carter, a journalism student at Louisiana State University. Emily read the article twice, feeling the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Sarah was investigating links between the police and organized crime, evidence tampering, witness tampering. The article mentioned several officers by name, including Detective Richard Blackman. The article was published a week before Sarah disappeared. Emily sat back in her chair, the magnitude of the discovery taking in. Sarah wasn't the random victim of a serial killer. She was a journalist who had gotten too close to a dangerous truth, and whoever had killed her had used Morris's methods to hide the true motive for the crime. But the worst was yet to come. If Blackman had indeed killed Sarah, he knew about Emily's visit to Morris. He knew about her suspicions, and he took steps to protect his secrets. Emily checked the locks on the doors and windows, took her service pistol from the safe, and went to bed without undressing. Sleep would not come. Every sound outside the window could be the steps of a killer, every shadow a threat. She was awakened in the morning by the ringing of the telephone. O'Connor. Emily, bad news. I checked your witnesses. Professor Stanford died in 2015 of cancer. Librarian Johnson moved to Canada and isn't answering her phone. And your roommate, what's wrong with her? Lisa Connor committed suicide a year after testifying. Drug overdose. Left a note in which she wrote about feelings of guilt and the impossibility of living with a lie. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. All the witnesses who had supported Sarah's alibi were dead or unavailable. Too many deaths for it to be a coincidence. Mike, I think we're dealing with something bigger than the murder of one journalist. This could be a whole system. Then be doubly careful. If they killed witnesses 15 years ago, they won't hesitate to kill an FBI agent today. After her conversation with O'Connor, Emily went to meet Ray Johnson. She didn't believe in coincidences. It was too convenient that Morris's cellmate was released at this time. But she had no choice. Every clue could lead to the truth about Sarah's death. Herman Park was full of people at midday. Tourists taking pictures by the monuments, children playing on the playgrounds, elderly people feeding ducks in the pond. The perfect place for a meeting. Too many witnesses for an open attack. Emily found the Sam Houston statue and sat down on the nearest bench. Ray Johnson appeared 10 minutes later, a thin man in his 50s with tattoos on his arms and the wary eyes of a man accustomed to danger. Dr. Carter, I'm Ray. He sat down next to her, looking around. Jacob asked me to give you this. Ray pulled an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a photograph, the same New Orleans street, but taken from a different angle. The police car's license plate and the face of a man in uniform were clearly visible. Richard Blackman. 15 years ago, the day Sarah disappeared. Where? Did Morris get this? Jacob says he has friends on the outside. People who collect information on those who put them away. a kind of insurance. Ray stood up, preparing to leave. One more thing. Jacob said you have to be careful. Blackman doesn't work alone. He has partners, people who help him cover his tracks. They call themselves the Justice Club. What does it mean? A group of cops who decided the law was too slow to work. They took the law into their own hands, killing those the system couldn't convict, or those who interfered with their work. Ray disappeared into the crowd, leaving Emily with the photograph and a growing understanding that she was up against something far more dangerous than one corrupt detective. The Justice Club. A group of law enforcement officers who became judges and executioners at the same time. And Sarah became their victim because she got too close to their secrets. Emily looked at the photo again, then tucked it into her purse. Now she had proof of Blackman's presence in New Orleans on the day her sister disappeared. But it wasn't enough to convict. She needed more, and she knew where to find it. It's time to return to Jacob Morris and learn the whole truth about the Justice Club, even if that truth destroyed everything she believed in. Huntsville State Penitentiary greeted Emily with a mournful silence. Guard Williams avoided her gaze as he led her through the metal detectors and down the hallways. Something had changed since her last visit. The atmosphere had grown thicker, more tense, as if the building itself sensed trouble. Dr. Carter, Captain Rodriguez, the head of security, stopped her. "I'm afraid I have bad news. Prisoner Morris passed away this morning." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She grabbed the wall to keep from falling. How? What happened? Heart attack. It happened around 4 in the morning. Doctors say he died instantly. Rodriguez handed her an envelope. "Before he died, he asked me to give you this. He said you would understand." Emily took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a key to a storage locker and a note in Morris's neat handwriting. "Dr. Carter, if you're reading this, they got to me sooner than I expected. Storage locker 247, Union Station, Houston. There you'll find the truth about the Justice Club. Be careful. They know what you're doing, probably more than you think. J.M. Captain, can I see the body?" Rodriguez shook his head. "Sorry, Doctor. The body has already been sent to the morgue. The family requested immediate cremation." "What family?" Morris had no relatives. A distant cousin showed up. He presented documents and completed everything according to the law. Emily felt the last of her illusions crumble to dust. Morris had been murdered, and his death disguised as natural. And now all evidence, including the body itself, was being destroyed. Upon leaving prison, she immediately called O'Connor. "Mike, I need your help. Urgently." "What's happened?" "Morris is dead. Officially a heart attack, but I'm sure he was murdered. He left me the address of the evidence stash." "Emily, it's a trap. If they killed Morris, they know about the cash." "Maybe, but that's the only lead I have." Pause. "Okay. Meet me at the station in an hour. And Emily, take the gun." Union Station in downtown Houston was bustling with activity, commuters rushing to board trains, tourists taking photos in the historic building, homeless people warming themselves in heated waiting rooms. Emily found the storage lockers in the basement, a long hallway lined with hundreds of metal boxes. O'Connor waited for her at the top of the stairs, looking around nervously. "Room 247, she said, showing the key. They found the right cell in the far corner of the corridor. The key turned easily, as if the lock had been recently oiled. Inside was a leather folder, thick with documents. Emily opened the folder and gasped. Photos, conversation logs, financial documents, lists of names. All of it told a story of corruption and murder that stretched back decades. The Justice Club, she read from the front page. Founded in 1995 by Detective Richard Blackman and Prosecutor James Whitfield. Purpose: to eliminate criminals who escaped punishment on technical grounds. O'Connor looked over her shoulder. Oh my God. This is a list of 50 murders over 20 years. Emily leafed through the documents, feeling the horror growing. The club had started with noble goals, killing pedophiles who had been released on technical violations, drug dealers who had bought judges, rapists who had escaped punishment due to procedural errors. But gradually the list of victims grew. Inconvenient witnesses, investigative journalists, honest police officers who asked too many questions, anyone who threatened the existence of the club. Look, O'Connor pointed to the page of financial records. They weren't just killing. They were taking money for contract killings, disguising them as club activities. Emily found a folder with her sister's name on it. Inside were copies of Sarah's articles, phone records, surveillance photos. The last entry was from the day before the murder. Carter is getting too close. Knows Black Man's connection to the Moretti family. Recommend immediate termination. Signed, D. Harris. Emily felt the world crumble around her. David Harris, her colleague, the man she had worked with for years, was a member of the club. He had known about her investigation from the beginning, had been watching her every move. Emily, O'Connor grabbed her arm. We have to go, now. But it was too late. 3 men in business suits entered the corridor. Emily recognized one of them. David Harris was walking in front, holding a pistol with a silencer in his hand. Dr. Carter, he said with a cold smile. What an unexpected meeting. Emily and O'Connor slowly raised their hands. The hallway was empty. No one to help or to witness. David, why? Why are you doing this? For the same reason it always does. For justice. Harris approached, not lowering his weapon. The system is broken, Emily. Criminals are released on technicalities. Victims are not given justice. Society is decaying. We are righting these wrongs. Killing innocent people. Innocent? Harris laughed. Your sister was about to ruin an operation that saved hundreds of lives. Morris was a serial killer who deserved to die. Where's the innocence in that? O'Connor moved slowly to the side, trying to get into position to attack. But one of Harris's men noticed the movement and aimed his gun at him. Don't move, Mr. O'Connor. We know about your past in the Special Forces. Emily realized there was no time for talking. Harris was going to kill them both and make it look like self-defense or an accident. David, think about what you're doing. I'm an FBI agent. My disappearance will attract attention. Your disappearance will be explained by a mental breakdown. After encounters with your sister's killer, you became obsessed with revenge, began to see conspiracies where there were none. A tragic story, but not uncommon in our profession. Harris raised his gun, aiming it at Emily's head. At that moment, O'Connor lunged at the nearest guard, beginning a desperate struggle. Emily took advantage of the confusion to duck behind a row of storage lockers. Shots rang out, the muffled pops of silencers. Emily heard O'Connor screaming in pain but still fighting. She drew her pistol and peered out from behind cover. One of Harris's men lay on the floor in a pool of blood. O'Connor was pressed against the wall, clutching his wounded shoulder. Harris and the remaining guard methodically searched the hallway, approaching her hiding place. "Emily!" Harris shouted. "Come out! You have nowhere to run anyway!" She looked down the hallway, looking for an exit. At the far end was an emergency staircase leading to the upper level, but it was a 30-meter run across open space. Emily took a deep breath and jumped out of cover, firing as she went. 1 shot, 2, 3. Harris's guard fell, but Harris himself managed to take cover and now fired accurately. A bullet whistled past Emily's head as she reached the stairs. She climbed the steps, hearing the footsteps of her pursuer behind her. The first floor of the station was crowded. Emily ran out into the main hall screaming, "Call the police, there's been a shooting!" Panic gripped the crowd. People ran for the exits, screamed, fell, crushed each other. In the chaos, Emily lost sight of Harris. She got to the office phone and called for backup, giving her agent number. Within 10 minutes, the station was surrounded by police cars and FBI vehicles. But Harris was nowhere to be found. He had disappeared into the crowd like a ghost. The bodies of 2 guards and the wounded O'Connor were found in the basement. The folder with the club's documents was missing. Harris managed to take it. "Emily," O'Connor croaked as he was loaded into an ambulance. "Be careful. Harris isn't the only one. There are people at the very top of the club." The next few days were spent in interrogation and debriefing. Emily told everything she knew about the Justice Club, but without documentary evidence, her words sounded like a conspiracy theory. Harris was put on the wanted list, but his tracks were lost. A week later, Emily was summoned by FBI Director Robert Stone. "Dr. Carter, I understand that recent events have been a major shock to you. The death of your sister, your encounters with a serial killer, the attack by a colleague, all of this may have affected your perception of reality." Emily saw where he was going with this. "Sir, I am fully aware of what is happening. The Justice Club exists, and its members—" "Dr. Carter," Stone interrupted. "Agent Harris suffered from a mental disorder. His actions were the result of personal pathology, not involvement in some mythical organization." Stone stood up and walked to the window. "I suggest you take a vacation. A long vacation. To heal your nerves, to rethink events. When you are ready to return to work, we will find a suitable position for you. Perhaps in another city." Emily realized that she was being offered silence in exchange for preserving her career, or leaving if she did not agree. "What if I refuse?" Stone turned to face her, his eyes cold and determined. "Then we will be forced to conduct an internal investigation into your mental fitness. I fear the results may be disappointing." Emily stood up and headed for the door. "I'll think about your offer." "Dr. Carter," Stone stopped her. "Sometimes the truth is too dangerous for the public good. Sometimes it's best to let sleeping dogs lie." As Emily left the office, she realized that Stone was also a member of the club, perhaps one of its leaders. The system was infected from top to bottom, and fighting it from the inside was useless. But she had a different plan. A month later, the Washington Post ran a series of articles about corruption in law enforcement. The author, a certain Emily Stone, a former FBI agent, told of a secret organization within the police that took on the functions of judge and executioner. The articles caused a scandal. Investigations, congressional hearings, arrests began. Several high-ranking officials resigned for family reasons. David Harris was found dead in a motel in Mexico, officially a suicide. But Emily knew the club had gotten rid of a compromised member. Robert Stone died of a heart attack 2 months after the articles were published. "Too much stress, doctors said." Emily moved to a small town in Oregon, where she worked as a psychologist at a local hospital. She changed her name, her appearance, her entire life. But every night, as she fell asleep, she thought about Sarah, and how fairness is a relative concept. The Justice Club was exposed but not destroyed. Somewhere in other cities, in other states, there were other groups that decided who deserved to live and who deserved to die. And perhaps some of their victims did deserve to be punished. Emily was never able to answer the main question: where is the line between justice and revenge? And does anyone have the right to cross this line? Jacob Morris was a serial killer, but he helped her find the truth about her sister's death. The Justice Club killed innocents, but also eliminated criminals that the system failed to punish. In a world where good and evil were intertwined to the point of indistinguishability, the only truth that remained was that every choice had a price, and Emily paid hers.